Llegamos a ustedes gracias a la conexión de Internet de Mechtel, de Future Design y Faceta Gráfica.
Nos vestimos de gala porque hoy nuestro invitado revolucionó el béisbol y vaya de qué manera ha cambiado el béisbol gracias a sus teorías. Hoy le vamos a dar la más cordial bienvenida al padre de la sabermetría, al señor Bill James. Yo soy Marcos Grunfeld, bienvenidos a Beatwriter, mi canal de YouTube. Gracias por la sintonía. Hoy para mí es un día especial porque después de buscar bastante, finalmente conseguimos esta entrevista que le vamos a presentar el día de hoy. Y como les he comentado, estamos con todo en esta nueva etapa de nuestro canal de YouTube. Gracias por estar con nosotros. Para seguir en sintonía de Beatwriter, los invito a suscribirse debajo de la pantalla del video. También le pueden dar a la campanita que está al lado para que les lleguen las notificaciones cada vez que subamos un nuevo video. Y también pueden apoyarnos en nuestra cuenta de Patreon, www.patreon.com/Beatwriter. Vamos a hacer el esfuerzo también de tener contenido especial para nuestro Patreon, que lo hemos tenido abandonado trabajando en esta nueva etapa de nuestro canal de YouTube. Pero, sin embargo, gracias a los que nos siguen apoyando ahí, a Ignacio, a Samuel, quienes nos apoyan en nuestra hoja de Patreon, y eso nos permite seguir trabajando fuerte en nuestro canal. Vamos a darle de una vez la bienvenida al señor Bill James. Él se encuentra en los Estados Unidos y hacemos esta conexión a través de Zoom gracias a Mechtel. Ustedes se pueden conectar a Internet desde Caracas o La Guaira gracias a Mechtel y sus planes de alta velocidad que van desde 5 hasta 100 megas según tus necesidades. Más adelante te vamos a hablar un poquito más de Mechtel, pero antes, ya ahora sí, vamos a darle la bienvenida al señor Bill James, a quien nos complace presentar aquí en Beatwriter. Thank you, Mr. James. It's a pleasure to talk with you. Welcome to Beatwriter. It's my YouTube channel name. And it's an honor for me to talk with you. And first of all, today, National Baseball Hall of Fame released the ballot of the Hall of Fame, of the next Hall of Famers. And what do you think, who should go in the Hall of Fame after the news came today?
Well, let's see. I would vote for Bonds, Barry Bonds. I would vote for Clemens. I would vote for Todd Hilton. That's 3. I would vote for Kurt Schilling. That's 4. So at least those 4. Others that I'd probably vote for Bobby Abreu. That's 5. So beyond that, let's see. I certainly think about, if I had a vote, I don't have a vote.
Okay.
If I did, I'd think about more deeply Tim Hudson, Andy Pettit, Manny Ramirez, Scott Rowland. I probably would vote for Rowland, so that's 6. Gary Sheffield, Sammy Sosa, and Billy Wagner. So I would vote for at least 6 of them.
I know that you maybe talk about that before, but what is your opinion about the steroid era and the players that were involved in that scandal in 2000?
Yeah. That there was a rule when no one was enforcing any such rule. No one was trying to enforce any such rule. Then to come along later and say, you violated a rule that was never agreed to, that was never enforced by anyone. That does not seem to me to be fair. So, I mean, if you feel that you were cheated, I respect that, but I don't think of them as cheaters. And I might discount what they've done somewhat because it was aided by something that we don't need in the game. But I don't throw everything they did out.
Mr. James, for the people that say that maybe in the sports was not prohibited the steroids, but in the United States did, what do you think about that?
Are you saying it was prohibited in the United States?
Yeah.
That's somewhat true and somewhat not true.
Okay.
By the end of the steroid era, there were strong rules in place against the sale and distribution of steroids, but that leaves a lot of doors open. At the time that baseball players started using steroids, which was the late 1970s, at that time there were no legal prohibitions against it at all in the U.S. I don't believe. The prohibitions were gradually put in place, but many of the players who used steroids were not spent half a year in the Dominican or in some other country south of America where it was warmer in the winter, and you cannot presume that they were violating any law unless you have evidence that they were violating a law. You can't presume that. Manny Ramirez, for example, Manny spent the winters in the Dominican, and I don't know where it wasn't illegal there,
okay.
And I don't know where he may have picked up steroids or used them. But I also had to say this, that I'm fortunate enough to have 4 World Series rings.
Yeah.
And I know very well who won those rings, and it wasn't me. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And nobody's coming to me and saying, "Hey, you need to get back those first 2 rings because you had players there using steroids." So it would be hypocritical for me to say that we should ban Manny Ramirez from his honor when he's one of the people most responsible for my having World Series rings in 2004 and 2007. So I just can't say that sort of thing.
Mr. James, about the case of Omar Vizquel, he went he went up to 52% last year in the ballot.
Who's that? I'm sorry.
Omar Vizquel.
Yes.
What do you think about his case in the Hall of Fame?
Well, let's not argue about it. Let's put it that way. I don't support his selection, but I understand why people do.
Okay. Mr. James, talking about recent news in baseball, today the Miami Marlins introduced Kim Ng or Kim Ng as general manager. What do you think about that?
I'm very happy for her. I'm very happy to see. I'm very happy she's had the opportunity. I do not know her. I don't recall that I've ever met her. I may have. I don't remember. But certainly she's had a long career in baseball, and no one should in any way discriminate against her based on her gender. I know that one of the Red Sox most competent executives who's been in baseball just as long as Ms. Ng is a woman, and she's an extremely competent person. She may not have exactly the right profile to be a GM, I don't know, but I know that she's one of the most capable executives the Red Sox have. That's Raquel Ferreira. That's who I'm speaking of.
About what happened in the World Series with Blake Snell, what do you think that Kevin Cash made the right decision?
No, he didn't. I mean, if you win, if a decision works out, it was the right decision, and if it doesn't work out, it was the wrong decision. And I've never understood the logic of saying that even though what you did, you know, turned out wrong, it was still the right decision. If it turned out wrong, it was not the right decision. That's true by definition, if you ask me. Setting aside that issue of it, would I have done it? Hell no. I mean, if you have a pitcher on the mound who's pitching really well, that's the best you can ask for. And I would never take out a unless you saw signs of weakening, or you felt there was an injury risk to allowing him to continue. Those to me are the only reasons for taking him out. Or, you know, if you're behind a run, you have to pitch out. Yeah, I guess that's the third reason.
Mr. James, do you think that people react very, very aggressively when Cash took him from the game? Do you think that it's complicated that people understand how baseball is played today with the analytical, with the sabermetrics?
No, the people don't understand it, and they misread it. I mean, analytics doesn't make any decisions. You know, it's just information which is fed into the manager's book, just like all the other information. It just doesn't make any sense to suggest that the analytics guys are calling the shots. They're not.
That's important because a lot of people think that the analytical people make some orders to the managers, and the managers took decisions in base of their orders.
Right. Yeah. Right. I know, but it's a misunderstanding. It's one switch thinking. People think that either you pay no attention at all to the analytics guy, or if you pay attention to him, then you must be doing what he tells you. But it's not either of those ways. It's you pay attention to what he tells you. You consider whether it's true. You consider whether it's relevant. But you don't have to do what he thinks you should do. And the same with the Hall of Fame. You know, to get back to the Hall of Fame, the Hall of Fame is just, the analytics stuff is just there to inform the discussion. It's not to decide the discussion. I mean, you can't use your analytics and draw a line and say everybody above this line should be in the Hall of Fame and nobody below this line should be in the Hall of Fame. Because the real life decision is always more complicated than your analytics. There's always something that you didn't put into your formula, which nonetheless is part of real baseball. So you have to think through the problem rather than just doing what analytics says you should do.
What do you think is the profile that today has the right DGM and the right manager to work in the better way in baseball?
Well, I think a lot of teams are. I mean, Kevin Cash is a really good manager, right?
Yeah.
And I disagreed with that one decision, but that doesn't mean he's not a really good manager. Yeah. I think the Padres have a lot going on for them. I think they have a very good manager and a very good general manager. I think the Red Sox still have an excellent combination of those two, and I expect the Red Sox to be back in competition next year. I'm sure there are many other teams that are equally good.
This year was tough for you. It's your first year as a retirement, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, that was tough for you.
It was brutal. It was just an awful team. And it's not like it was a surprise. They had no starting pitching to start the year, and just there's nothing. You know, they didn't have Rodriguez or their 4 starting pitchers from 2018. You know, 4 top guys were Rodriguez, the Chris Sale, Porcello, and blanking out on fourth. But anyway, they were all gone. David Price.
Yeah.
They're all gone. So we didn't. It's not like we had anybody else to replace them. So we had no starting pitching going into the season. So it was a terrible year.
But for you personally, it was tough this year to be out from baseball.
Well, this is 2020 has been a tough year on everybody for one reason or another. Hasn't been any tougher on me than anybody else, but yes, it's been a tough year for everybody.
Mr. James, how did you start your career in baseball? You study economics in the United States. How this idea of found some things in statistics to change the way the game has been played. How that start for you? How the idea started for you, and you started to study some things to become an executive in baseball?
First of all, I had no thought in the world that the things I did would have the reach that they. Economic theory is a way of finding the value of everything. So I started out as trying to find what's the value of a run scored relative to a win, or what's the value of a single relative to a run scored. What's the value of a stolen base relative to a caught stealing? What's the value of a walk relative to a strikeout? And I started out trying to measure those things and find the answers, and it took off. I knew that there were some people who were interested in that sort of thing, but I had enormously underestimated the number of people who were interested in it.
What do you feel what do you felt at the time when you started to have some opinions of baseball executives, like Mr. Billy Bean was reading your writings, and then you met with Mr. John Henry, and he hired you to run the baseball operations in the Boston Red Sox. What do you felt at the time?
Well, first of all, I didn't run the baseball operations of the Red Sox. I worked in. Just to keep that clear.
Sorry for my English. I try.
English is fine. By the time that those things happened, I'd been around a long time, and I had been fighting. My work found an audience much sooner than I had ever expected, and a much larger audience than I'd ever expected. But after that, after my work had an audience, there was a strong resistance to it within organized baseball, and it was 25 years after that resistance started to crumble. But my career was kind of in the doldrums at that time, and I was very, very happy to be invited in and allowed to say what I had to say.
How do you met Mr. Henry, and how was it the moment when he hired you?
It was very exciting to me, but it was great. First of all, I love Boston. I mean, I had a lot of fun going to Boston. I still love Boston. So that was great. But also, I knew for certain that this was going to work. I never had any doubt that I thought, this guy knows what he's doing. And I met Theo, and, again, this is a young man who knows what he's doing. And I had opportunities to work in baseball before then. But I never had confidence. It was never the right moment. First of all, I had other things going on in my career earlier, and that would have been a drag on it. But also, I never had confidence that the people were going to succeed. And you shouldn't work with people if you don't have confidence they're going to succeed. So it was an exciting moment, but also a kind of relaxed moment because I never had any doubt that we were going to make it.
When finally Boston got their first inning, 86 years. What do you think that team has? Manny Ramirez, David Ortiz, Pedro. What do you think was the most, besides that team, Kurt Schilling, it was a great team with a great rotation, with a great relievers, with a great players in the lineup. What do you think was the best decision that was based on your theories that Boston made at the moment and worked to get the ring?
Well, what seemed at the time like the biggest, sometimes decisions that seemed small turned out to be huge, and decisions that seemed huge sometimes weren't. But the most important thing we did that first winter was to sign David Ortiz. I mean, there's no question about that.
Yeah.
David had been let go by the Twins, and a lot of that was, and this is what people don't get, but while David was regarded as a kind of a journeyman or kind of a ordinary talent in the United States, in the Dominican, in the winter, he was a superstar. I mean, and we had Manny and we had Pedro, and they knew that they knew what he was. I mean, people in the U.S. had not figured it out, but Manny and Pedro and others with our team knew this guy is the real deal. If we can just get him started, he's going to have he's going to be as big here as he was there. So but that was a huge decision. Another one that was really big and it was hard. In the summer of 2004, we traded Nomar Garcia-Parra, and that was a difficult decision. But Nomar was a great player from like '97 to 2003. But by 2004, he was brittle. He couldn't stay in the lineup, and he wasn't a great defensive player. And he would still hit well, but we had a lot of guys that hit. So it was really difficult because he was so beloved in Boston. It was very hard to trade him, but we did it, and it was the right decision.
Esta entrevista con Bill James llega a ustedes gracias a Meshtel. Meshtel es una empresa de alta velocidad de Internet que funciona en Caracas y La Guaira. Te ofrecen de 5 a 100 megas de velocidad. Es la misma velocidad de subida que de bajada y de verdad que es una conexión bastante estable. La recomiendo ampliamente, ya tengo tiempo trabajando con ellos y de verdad me va súper bien. Soy mucho más productivo desde que cuento con Meshtel. Si necesitas una conexión de alta velocidad a Internet en Caracas o La Guaira, conéctate con Meshtel. What do you think that is your most valuable input in baseball and in the Red Sox? For that, you have 4 rings. You already say that you have 4 rings in baseball. What do you think is the most valuable input that you made?
You'd have to ask somebody else. It's not really for me to say what. I did very little. I know that. I know that I was not a huge contributor to that organization, but I appreciate having the right to having been around for it.
You said before that people, it's hard for them to understand the changes that baseball made with the analytics. Why do you think that happened? Why is it so difficult for a lot of people to understand those changes?
In my own case, and this is about stuff that happened before you were born, but sometimes I was rude. I mean, I was a writer, and I made a lot of jokes, and some of them were insensitive to people who were inside baseball, and this picked up some rhythm. There are a lot of people in the world, and you should always remember that we have blind spots that are just as large, that all of us have gaps in our understanding and that are just as large, and we all resist knowing things that we probably should know.
And about the sacrifice bond that is almost disappearing in baseball. Some old school people is against that the sacrifice bond is disappearing from baseball. Why do you think that happened, and what is the theory behind that the sacrifice bond is disappearing from baseball?
If you go back 100 years, there was very unequal, a great inequality between the abilities of the best hitters and the weakest hitters. You know, if you compare Jimmy Fox to Jimmy Fox's worst teammates, there was a huge gap in their abilities. Over time, that gap has gotten smaller, and so it makes less sense for one guy to give up his at-bat for another guy. That's one thing. Another thing is that the sacrifice bond probably never really made sense, except for a pitcher. Sometimes it makes sense for a pitcher to bunt, but otherwise, I shouldn't say it never makes sense. There are not a lot of situations that it makes sense, and gradually, people figured that out. And I wasn't the first person to say that, but you know, there were a group of us who argued, you know, this really is not helping you score runs. As people stopped bunting because it didn't make sense, they also lost the ability to bunt. Yeah. So the players now, in the main, are not good bunters, or maybe the pitchers are just so good it's hard to bunt them. I don't know. But the combination of those three things has more or less driven the bunt out of the game. There are still some guys who are really good bunters. You mentioned Omar Vizquel earlier. I mean, you can say what you want to, but if Omar was in the game today, he can bunt on anybody. He always could. And there are still some guys like that who can bunt. Although there's only one guy who's on that level in the major that I know of. But you know, it's not impossible. It's just not very many people have that skill.
And what do you think about the WAR, and how much impact has that statistic in baseball right now? Because we have two WAR, Fangraph WAR and Baseball Reference WAR. We don't have one statistic unified. So that impact in the argument of that statistic.
Right. I hope I can make this clear. I don't hate the concept of war. You know, I mean, a war in which people killed, I get killed. I don't like that. But war in baseball, I do not hate the idea or despise the idea or anything like that. It originally comes from my work, right? Yeah. I originally suggested the idea that a player's actual value was his value above replacement level. And then other people, other than myself, took that idea and said, okay, what is the replacement level and how far are people above it? But the problem with that is that it's really, really, really difficult to measure that accurately. In order to measure how much more value one player has than another, you have to first measure how much value each player has, right? That's, when you think about it, it's obvious. But when you measure how much value a player has, you're going to have some error. When you measure the replacement level, you're going to have some error. When you put those two together, you have a smaller base, and you have all of the error that's in either measurement. So the error relative to the measurement becomes huge. And the consequence of that is that neither WAR is accurate enough to be reliable. I mean, people rely on them to an extent that's extremely unfortunate. I mean, it's worthwhile to try to measure this, but it's wrong to think that you have measured it. So I wish that we could go back to a place where people didn't rely quite as much on war as they have come to do.
Right now in baseball, also we have a lot of home runs, a lot of strikeouts, and a reduction of balls in place.
Right.
What do you think about that? What do you think is going? Where baseball is going with that?
Well, everybody likes baseball the way it was when they first fell in love with it, right?
Yeah.
So you know, if this should be major factors in how the game is played, but it's very hard to make that happen.
Do you think that the starting pitchers will disappear sometime from baseball, and the GMs and the managers will bet in the opener?
It could be that will happen. Yes, it could be that the starting pitcher will disappear, but it also could be that we will find that once we start doing this every day on every team, that it doesn't work as well as we thought it would. I mean, it could be that it's something that works for a team that does not have a lot of talent, but on a team that has talent, you're better off with starting pitchers. So it could go that direction, but I wouldn't say that it would or will. I hope it doesn't. But.
Okay, that will be an advantage, as I see it, that you maybe have less work for the pitchers, and
right.
with that you will avoid some injuries, maybe.
Right. But, well, yeah, but you know that's why we stopped complete games, but that hasn't actually reduced any injuries. I mean, we still had just many injuries as we had back when pitchers were pitching 11 innings in a game. So it is like every generation of managers and general managers discovers that the previous generation was doing some things that just didn't make any sense. And you never want to be too sure that things we're doing right now are what everybody should have been doing forever, because some of them are, but some of them are things that in 20 years people look back at and say, what the hell were those people doing?
Mr. James, do you think that with all this change that baseball had in the past decade, maybe some people of my generation or older, I am 34, maybe disconnect them from baseball, and because I think that baseball is very oriented right now with young people. But what happened with the people that grow with another baseball, with a different way to play the game? Some of those people are complaining about the change in the game. Do you think that could be a problem for baseball anytime soon, or do you think that baseball is going very well to try to go for the young people?
I think it's definitely a problem, and it's not a problem in the future. It's a problem now.
Yeah.
I mean, attendance in 2017-18 was declining at a significant level. TV viewership is. It's not a problem for you. It's a problem now, and I mean it's not that hard to solve, but you have to get in there and do it.
And how to make a balance between playing the baseball game without losing the attendance of the people, and using the technology. How we can make that balance to play the game in the right way?
No, I don't know. There's a lot of things involved in that, but one thing is you have to make the pace of play work. I mean, the game, there is too much standing around, and you have people like to see something happen. You don't turn on a movie and watch people sit and talk for an hour. You like to see something happen. So baseball has the same issue.
Last question, Mr. James, and thank you for accepting the invitation today. Do you think that Tony La Russa hiring, I know that Dusty Baker was hired for the circumstance with the Astros. Do you think that is positive for baseball to have old school managers? I don't know if Tony La Russa is an old school at all, but he was out of the dugout for 10 years. So do you think that is positive for the game?
Yeah, well, I mean, as an old guy, I'm going to root for all the old guys, right?
Okay.
I worked with Tony in Boston. I liked him. He's a good guy. I hope he succeeds. As we get older, we do tend to have difficulty adapting to new things. It's real. It's not imaginary. It's a real problem. On the other hand, we don't turn stupid when we hit 70. You know, I suspect Tony's just as smart as he ever was, and so I think there's I don't think it's predetermined that he's going to fail. I don't think it's predetermined he's going to succeed. I think he has a fair chance.
And what do you think about Ozzy again? Do you think that it's unfair that he is out of the game?
Oh, it is, yeah. I mean, Ozzy was a lot of fun, and I mean, he said some stupid stuff, and so do I. You know, I say stupid stuff, and it wasn't the only problem with Ozzy, but I certainly would love to see him back in the game because it was a lot of fun. It was always saying something.
Maybe you don't want to say this, but I will do. You are responsible of a lot of changes in baseball. Are you happy that your voice was heard in baseball and some changes were made for the good of baseball?
Well, some of the changes that followed from my work were good, and some of them may not have been. But when you reach a certain age, you can't talk about what's wrong with the world, or people just dismiss everything you say. So you know, I try to enjoy the game, no matter how it is, no matter how it's played. The 2020 season was terribly hard getting it underway in the early season. The Red Sox were terrible. It was still great. It was a great season in many respects. So you know, whatever it is, I'll try to enjoy it, and that's about the best I can do.
Thank you, Mr. James. It was a very honor for me. I read your work, and for me, it's really an honor to having you in my YouTube channel, and I hope that you enjoyed the conversation.
I did enjoy it very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ustedes lo escucharon, fue Bill James, el creador, el padre de la sabermetría. Y espero que ustedes hayan disfrutado de esta entrevista que tuvimos el gran honor de realizar aquí en mi canal de YouTube de Beatwriter. Yo soy Marcos Grunfeld, fue un placer acompañarlos, gracias por la sintonía, espero que muchas cosas hayan quedado claras y espero que hayan disfrutado de este video. Si quieren seguirme apoyando, solamente se tienen que suscribir debajo de la pantalla del video, le dan al botón rojo de suscribirse, a la campanita que está al lado para que les lleguen las notificaciones cada vez que subamos un nuevo video. Y también pueden seguirnos en nuestra cuenta de Patreon, www.patreon.com/Beatwriter.